Welcome back. We continue to watch how Congress will vote on a bill named after Laken Riley. Of course, she's that 22-year-old nursing student murdered by an illegal immigrant. This act expands the federal government's mandate to detain immigrants who are in the country illegally. So here's where we are on this at this hour. The vote is back to the House after an amendment was made in the Senate. So Democrats and Republicans sounding off on that today. We got a smattering of what they had to say. Listen.
He's supporting the Laken Riley Act later today.
I'm still looking at it. I'm concerned that people who are supporting it, there's a provision and people who assault law enforcement officers or things like that. But they support the pardon that the president gave to people who assaulted law enforcement officers. So, I have to look at it.
Congressman, will you be supporting the Laken Riley Act later today?
No, no, I'm not supporting the Laken Riley Act. The Laken Riley Act shifts the law, which for decades has said we're going to detain and deport from the country people who are convicted of criminal offenses like murder, rape, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and it shifts from conviction as a standard to a mere arrest, even if there are no charges brought.
We are working very closely in close coordination with the White House, because this is an America First agenda that takes both of those branches of government to work in tandem. And so what he's doing is kickstarting what will ultimately be our legislative agenda, and you're going to begin to see that. The Laken Riley Act is a perfect example. The president will have that on his desk for signature, and that's the first of many bills that will be addressing all these great problems. So look for that.
We are also looking for more, and that comes from CBS News political reporter Taurean Small watching this act advance. So, Taurean, I thought that was interesting what Mr. Raskin had to say, that shift from convictions and deportations to arrests and deportations. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, and that's at the heart of the concerns of Democrats, which is why many of them are not supporting it. I should note, though, that 12 Democrats in the Senate did support this measure, which is why we saw it voted out of that chamber and it's headed back to the House. And it could be well on its way to the president's desk by the end of the day as well. But at the root here of their concerns is the fact that this would essentially eliminate due process. No longer would conviction be the threshold to send folks here illegally back to their home countries. It would take just purely an arrest or the accusation of a crime being committed against someone here illegally.
Other news on the Hill today, Taurean, blanket January 6 pardons from President Trump. Many of the lawmakers who were there on that day reacting to the move, these were people from both sides of the aisle who were locked in their offices and afraid for their own safety. Stay with me because I want to air this and then talk about it. This is what Jamie Raskin had to say about those moments.
I'm thinking a lot today about Officer Brian Sicknick, who was attacked by one of the insurrectionists, or several of the insurrectionists. He was sprayed in the face with chemicals. He was violently assaulted repeatedly, and he died on January the 7th after having several strokes, and his family is extremely upset about what's happening. But that's true of hundreds and hundreds of families across the country and millions of people who think it's absolutely outrageous that the president would pardon en masse such a dangerous group of people.
So, Taurean, while Representative Raskin was there talking about that, Enrique Tarrio, ex-Proud Boys leader, was wheels up from Dallas into Florida. What is the reaction, especially from Capitol Police, the ones that Mr. Raskin talks about, and what they experienced in their ranks that day?
Yeah, largely discussed, especially with the release of Enrique Tarrio. This is a guy who was convicted for sedition, conspiracy, on top of obstruction, and a myriad of other charges there. But not too many folks, especially in law enforcement, are happy by this decision. In fact, we saw the largest fraternity order of police come out with a statement after being mum about a response to this after that pardon happened. They said that they didn't support this, but they did also target Biden, saying that they weren't necessarily supportive of Biden pardons as well. At the root of this, though, we see Democrats calling out hypocrisy from Republicans on this issue. I want to bring it back just a few days ago when House Speaker Mike Johnson said that it was disgusting. He found it disgusting that Joe Biden pardoned members of his family. A few days later, he's saying this is well within the president's powers. He's saying he leaves it to President Trump to decide who he wants to give pardons to, and he says he believes believes in the idea of second chances. So Democrats are obviously pouncing on that, saying, hey, this is not Republicans standing with the blue, backing the blue, or being about this party of law and order if you're going to release and pardon folks who committed crimes against law enforcement here in 2021.
Yes, certainly a lot of eyebrows raised regarding presidential pardon power because of Mr. Biden and now Mr. Trump. While we have you, Taurean, I want to ask you about this. New allegations surrounding Pete Hegseth, the man set up, at least, by Donald Trump to lead the Defense Department. Walk us through the allegations. We understand they're from his former sister-in-law. What are they, and do you think that these will have any juice whatsoever with lawmakers?
Yeah, Danielle Hegseth, formerly married to Pete Hegseth's brother, she sent this affidavit to the committee, the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, at the request of the ranking Democrat on this panel. He asked her to clarify some incidents or instances of public drunkenness, of abuse of Pete Hegseth's wife at the time, Samantha Hegseth, and to lay out any other concerning details that this committee should be made privy to. This comes after that same top Democrat said during Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing that he thought that this investigation into him was insufficient, saying that it wasn't exhaustive enough, and a lot of voices were left out of this. Danielle ultimately obliged, saying that another reason why she's circling back is because of the testimony that she gave to the FBI and confidence she didn't feel was effective or efficient. So she wanted to come forward publicly and talk about some instances that she saw that was in her mind scary, including a conversation that she had with Samantha that said that Samantha told her that she feared for her safety at one point. I should note that Pete Hegseth and his attorney is denying this unequivocally, saying that he at no point exhibited signs of abuse to his then wife at the time, that they ended amicably. And they're also pointing to court documents that Samantha put out saying that no, Hegseth did not do anything abusive to her during the time of their marriage.
Taurean Small, CBS News political reporter. Of course, the question is, will this new development have any traction with those who will cast their votes? We appreciate that update from Capitol Hill.